Good afternoon and welcome to our Eureka Remediation Tools webinar. This is part 1 of 2, focusing on the Louisiana Department of Education's Eureka Remediation Tools for grades 4 through 6. My name is Madeline Brown and I work for the Achievement Network, or ANET, and based here in New Orleans, Louisiana. At ANET, we're a not-for-profit organization that works with schools and districts in Louisiana as well as other states around the country to support better opportunities for students by using standards and data to strengthen our instructional programs. And so we're really excited to have partnered with the Louisiana Believes team. They put together these fabulous new resources, and we're loving the opportunity to talk to teachers and leaders around the state, both in person and virtually like we are this afternoon, about how these might be able to support the instructional planning that you're doing in your school buildings. So I'd love if we could just start with a warm-up, and I want to see, for those of you that are attending this afternoon, have you already used the Eureka Remediation Tools this year? Can you go ahead and find the chat box and write yes or no? And if you have, would love to hear a success or a challenge. We definitely have a mix of folks that have already used them and, you know, maybe are here today to troubleshoot or learn more, pick up additional pointers. We would love to see one person coming across saying that they were successful. So eager to hear the perspectives via the chat of those that have already used them, and we'll build in time for questions as well. But a lot of folks also who seem new to them, so I'm excited to share them with you today. What our objective is for this 2-part webinar series is for everyone to learn how these Eureka Remediation tools can help you diagnose the critical foundational skills, prerequisite skills from prior grade level standards that students may not be at full mastery of, and then to see specifically how and when you can address unfinished learning. So even if you have already used them a little bit, again, hopefully you'll leave this 2-part series clear about either the diagnostic or planning aspects of these great tools. Today we're going to start with an overview of the tools, and then we're going to dive into some sample student work from grade 5 to practice analyzing that and how we would draw conclusions about the unfinished learning that students have, and then we'll look at what the aligned remediation materials are for those particular skills. Tomorrow we'll get more into the action planning, looking more deeply at the materials available when you identify remediation is necessary. And then we'll talk about when remediation can occur, both within your module or unit and within the school schedule, and have time for Q&A. Excuse me. So if you're brand new to the Eureka Remediation Tools, a few things to know. These are available for prioritized topics in grades 4 through 8, as well as Algebra 1. And in general, those topics within the Eureka modules that have been prioritized for a tool are those that address the major work of the grade and or are particularly reliant on students having mastery of prior grade level skills to be able to dive into those on grade level module lessons. Each tool contains 3 diagnostic questions for each prior grade level standard that's foundational for the new content that's going to be addressed in that topic. So we'll look at what those questions look like and how to use them. Then they point teachers to which portions of prior grade level Eureka lessons could be used to target unfinished learning. So that's something I really appreciate about this, is that, you know, a lot of times when I think about diagnostics that I used to use when I was teaching, is that we would often find that, okay, students are weak in a lot of areas, but it was completely left, you know, to me to figure out what I might do about that. And this great tool has really specific recommendations to consider about what lessons and what components would target that unfinished learning. And then we'll talk about, as I mentioned, whether these within your school model are most applicable for the core math class, intervention time, or potentially a combination. So last week we ran this series with our secondary math teachers, and I think we had a mix of teachers that lead the core math block, as well as those that are interventionists or working with students in a small group setting, and I think these tools can apply to both. Little logistics about where you can access these if you haven't already. I have the link up on the site. You should see under Web Links, LDOE Math Resources. This takes you to that page that has, on Louisiana Believes, all K-12 math planning resources. And if you scroll down to the bottom is where you'll find Eureka Remediation tools. The first, so everything we'll look at today, except for the sample student work, is linked there. The first thing I want us to look at is the Eureka Remediation introduction. So you can go ahead and open that now, either by navigating to this web link, or I also uploaded the file in the top right of the webinar interface. You'll see Eureka ER Introduction is the PDF file. So if everyone can go ahead and take a moment and access that. So when you have that file open, you should see what's now being shared on my slide. And this overview is great communication from the Department of Ed telling us which module topics in each grade have a remediation tool. As I was saying earlier, they've prioritized those specific module topics that focus on major work of the grade and are significantly dependent on students having prior mastery of standards to be able to access the new content. And so the ones that have a check mark next to them are already posted. So great news for those of us working specifically in grades 4 through 6. Those have been completed and are uploaded on the state website. In 7th, 8th, and Algebra 1, they're still coming out on a rolling basis throughout this fall. At this point in the year, I would think in terms of pacing, teachers have completed Module 1. So now we're looking ahead to the upcoming modules and seeing here which ones have Eureka remediation tools that we can make use of. I'm going to ask us to start digging into one example one. I just selected Grade 5, Module 2, Topic C. You can go ahead and access that now. Again, it's a file attached at the top right or on the Louisiana Believes site. And when you have that open, you'll see that there's a cover page that talks specifically about this 5th grade content, but I actually want you to go to the page beyond that, which is labeled Page 1. So not the cover page, Page 1. And I'm going to give everyone about 3 minutes to go ahead and read that Page 1 to yourself, including the sections called Overview, Diagnostic Assessment, and Guidance for Remediation. And this guidance applies to all grades. So go ahead and read a little bit more once you have that file up. And when you're done reading, if you could type into the chat box, based on this Page 1 overview, how might this resource be helpful to you? Great, so helpful to hear how everyone's thinking about how this is going to be useful in pre-assessment, identifying those struggles that students have, and making connections to how we can make sure RTI and intervention time is more targeted and aligned to the core math curriculum. I'm excited to see those reflections. One thing that we've seen a lot is just when many of the schools that we partner with began using Eureka, one of the most common challenges that we heard from the teachers that we would work alongside was that they found that they just had so many students that were behind and not ready to access the lessons. And so I'm very hopeful that this can address that in a very efficient way that allows us to get to the grade level content with our students as quickly as possible. I'm going to ask you to turn back now, still in that same Grade 5 Module 2 Topic C attachment, to the first cover page. And this is where we can read a little bit more about this specific topic, the focus standards and content that students would access. I'm going to ask everybody to read that cover page and then share in the chat box in one sentence, what skills and knowledge do students gain in this topic of Eureka? I see in the chat box that they may have lost my sound. So if you can hear me now, if someone will go ahead and type hi. Great. Thank you. So again, we're looking over the cover page of the Eureka Remediation tool and summarizing what skills and knowledge students gain in this topic of the 5th grade curriculum. So as I'm reading through the chats, I think collectively I'm seeing a lot of the really critical things in this topic, whether there's a focus on, fluently multiplying multi-digit factors. I see area models, distributive property, the importance of all of this being grounded in our understanding of place value. I'll go ahead and share. I honed in on use of the standard algorithm for multi-digit multiplication and just the importance of that being based in a number of the things below and that you all called out in the chat. I really appreciate this note to Louisiana teachers that's included in here because it is important to realize if you are the 5th grade math teacher that although 4th graders should have seen multi-digit multiplication, the standards do not call for them to be exposed to the standard algorithm for that. So ideally, our students are coming to 5th grade feeling very clear on partial products and area models, and that this module topic B is an opportunity to extend that to both larger numbers and to the standard algorithm over multiple days. And what this Eureka Remediation tool can really help us do is figure out what we're going to do if the kids aren't coming in with that solid 4th grade understanding. But important to note that we're not expecting kids to come to us in 5th grade having ever done the standard algorithm for multiplication. Thinking about what we just read on the cover page and the sample 5th grade level question below, what foundational skills come to mind? If you want to just go ahead and make a quick list, share a couple in the chat. What foundational skills do you think kids need from 4th grade, 3rd grade, whatever, to be already firmly in place for them to engage in this new learning in grade 5? So I see most of us naming place value and multiplication facts, which are definitely huge here. The ones that I've called out on the screen are basic, 1-digit multiplication facts, just the fluency and accuracy with that. The standard algorithm for addition, so right when we're doing multi-digit multiplication, we need to be able to add up our multi-digit partial products. And so being able to add quote-unquote big numbers there is quite important. And then I think the strategies for area model and others that we'll look at for multi-digit multiplication coming out of prior grades. And that could be, say, 3-digit by 1-digit or 2-digit by 2-digit as required by the 4th grade standards. So I want us, now that we've done that work of understanding what is the grade level content being introduced in 5th grade, what do we think we would say are those foundational skills most needed? I want us to turn to the diagnostic that Louisiana Department of Ed has provided within the Eureka Remediation tool to see how that can help us diagnose the foundational skills. So for this particular, and this is on the Eureka Remediation tool, it's page 2. You'll see the actual diagnostic. And part A guides us to administer a 3rd grade sprint. So when we called out that fluency with our basic multiplication facts, that's that 3rd grade standard 3OA7. And the fluency is so important there. So they point us to a sprint from Eureka 3rd grade. So we can go ahead and click to that, use that as a timed exercise in our class to identify any students that may be inaccurate or too slow if we see them having to use strategies rather than know these facts from memory. I'm not going to have us do that part now, but I am going to have us go ahead and solve the diagnostic problems as a student would, showing your work for parts B and C. So that's questions 2 through 7 here on the diagnostic assessment. As you're doing the math for part C and thinking about rectangular arrays or area models, I'll show a couple of examples of what those may look like in a moment. So hopefully by doing the math ourselves here, we're able to think critically about what skills kids really need to put together to show mastery of all of these prior grade level standards. And I think, in doing so, I always reflect on the types of errors or misunderstandings, misconceptions I used to see in the students that I would teach math, and just really helps me, focus in as I'm planning for an upcoming unit about what some of the snags might be. On the screen, you'll see a couple examples I wanted to share, especially if you're not a fourth grade teacher, about what this might look like. So an area model, we might show how students decompose that first factor of 423 using place value understanding into the kind of expanded form, 400s, 2 10s, and 3 1s, and then, are able to multiply that by 4 and then add up their partial products. Another strategy is using the equations there to, again, decompose the factor and find, in this case, 4 partial products and add those up. And then the rectangular array was the one that was most interesting to me because I had really only seen arrays done for like single digit, more like third grade multiplication. And a colleague showed me this, and I appreciated it, of how students that have used place value discs, which are really common. I see those a lot in the Eureka second grade lessons and others when I'm observing. Students could model this multiplication problem using an array of place value discs of hundreds, tens, and ones as a strategy to find their answer. So again, in fourth grade, those are all different types of strategies that they would be exposed to, that they would be using to solve multi-digit multiplication. And now in fifth grade, this module is getting them ready to use the standard algorithm as well as multiply factors with larger numbers. So thinking through parts B and C of the diagnostic assessment that we just did the math for, I want to sort of reflect, is there anything, did the diagnostic cover all of the skills we had identified below, or do we feel like there's anything else missing that as you think about preparing to teach students this module would be really important foundational skills? Yeah, so I see the comment about not lining up the numbers in the right place value, which I think is a really common error type, and I think one that we'll see a little bit of as we turn to some student work on this diagnostic. But I would say that that particular type, noticing things like that is so important, and is why it's going to be important to go beyond did they get the questions on the diagnostic right or wrong, and to actually look at the student work to see if it's wrong, what are the nature of the errors that they're making, because our action is going to depend on specifically whether they're getting some of these wrong because they're lacking fact fluency, or because they're not lining up their numbers wrong and combining tens and ones, or those sorts of place value errors. So I think that's great. My experience as I have dug into the Eureka remediation tools is that they've done a really great job of covering in these various parts which prior grade level standards and foundational skills are the most common errors that we see. So I think that these are great diagnostics. We can use them in different parts as we'll talk about, but they should cover most of the foundational skills that are most essential, that allow us to be efficient rather than trying to assess all fourth grade content and see if they're really ready for fifth grade. We want to be able to hone in on the most kind of just in time, most important foundational skills, and make sure that students have those gaps filled before we overwhelm them. We're going to go ahead now and turn to the sample student work. So this is another file that is attached at the top right of the webinar interface, the student work for grade 5. And this shows 6 fictional students' sample work. And I want you to go ahead and use either the answer key you just created by answering the problems yourself and doing the math, or if you want to turn to the next page, page 3, there's actually the solutions page included as part of the remediation tool. Score the 6 pieces of student work for parts B and C so that we can assess where the gaps are and where there's unfinished learning. And I think we're hearing some background noise for some folks, so if you are having a conversation, if you can make sure that you have yourself on mute. Thanks so much. As you finish scoring those 6 student diagnostic assessments, I want us to start to make a list of which students would need remediation on each part. And I'm going to draw our attention back to this piece that is included in the overview about the tool that we read at the beginning, where it says for the diagnostic assessment, if a student correctly answers at least 2 out of the 3 questions, we can assume they're ready to engage with the new content. And so that's going to be kind of our proficiency marker here, is if they get at least 2 or 3, they may have made a small error, but they're likely ready to move into grade level content. So with that in mind, as you've scored the student work, if you can go ahead and chat which students did not pass for Part B and for Part C. Great. So I see that we've identified, students 5 and 6 are kids that for Part B, that standard about the multi-digit addition, they need remediation there. And then students 1 and 6 did not pass for Part C using various place value strategies to multiply multi-digit numbers. And I put an asterisk next to student 1 because I think that was the student that was potentially borderline. They did show some understanding, made an error actually in Part C as they were adding the partial products. So, those are the kinds of judgment calls that we're always making in our classrooms about whether or not that student would benefit from additional work, and just made a simple careless error in which of those that there is the reason behind missing that. Within the tool, I wanted to call out what's on the screen, that the assessment is designed so that we can specifically determine that entry point. As I was mentioning earlier, we know it's just impossible with kind of the quick pace and all the content there is to get through in 5th grade to go back through all 4th grade content. And so this is designed to be really targeted so we can have the precise entry point where remediation is needed. And that's going to be different for different students, and that's where looking at their student work on the diagnostic is so important, beyond just seeing what was, correct or not correct. Another piece that I really like within the tool is how they've called out what the most important look-fors are. So in Part B, when we're talking about fluent addition of whole numbers, the most important look-for is the accuracy of the answer. That's really what we're looking for there. In Part C, we're looking both for the accuracy of the answer as well as the efficiency of their strategy. So because this gets more at some of the conceptual understandings of place value and how that applies to multiplication, you'd really want to look here to see whether there are efficient strategies in play there. For example, if students got numbers 5 and 6 in Part C correct, but they were using repeated addition, that would be a flag that they don't have an efficient strategy here. So again, these look-fors within the tool, I think, are really important to read to give us a great lens as we're analyzing the student assessment responses. In addition to the identification of which students didn't pass and are going to need remediation in that prior grade level standard, assessment is always a great place to learn more about our students and their needs. And I would call out a couple things that I noticed. You might have seen for the addition problems in Part B, student 2 was making tally marks. So I just highlighted that, showing that they may have some addition fact fluency issues that we can support. In student 4 for Part B, they used a place value chart to aid in their regrouping. So just learning a little bit more about where my students are and what strategies they're using. In Part C, you probably saw for number 7, I don't think a single student got it right, the 2-digit by 2-digit multiplication. So that's something we might be able to build in some remediation on whole class. And then I also was noticing student 3 had that, equation strategy and was effectively breaking down the factors, decomposing them to be able to work on their multiplication. So just, making kind of those teaching notes to myself beyond just going through and saying which kids passed or didn't pass each part of the diagnostic. I'm going to give us a moment now that we've identified those gaps to go back to the remediation tool and turn to pages 6 and 7 to read through what the remediation guidance would be for students that are missing that foundational skill. And so these remediation resources for targeted instruction, as you can see, point us to the very specific lessons and even components of the lesson, whether it's a fluency practice, concept development, a sampling of the problem set, to get at which of those lessons we all have access to from the prior grades and specifically address this. And I just can't highlight enough how much stronger, since we know Eureka is such a standards-aligned curriculum, how much stronger using these resources might be than if we just Googled lesson for addition practice or something like that, and we could get something really unaligned. This is telling us and not sending us on like a wild goose chase, specifically which portions of which lessons can address with these gaps that we've diagnosed. So to sum up here, what we've started to walk through today is our recommended approach for supporting struggling students in math. We start with the diagnostic. So we are thinking about how can we embed these diagnostic questions in our instruction or assessment prior to starting the new module or topic. I think it can be useful to even break up the different parts of these diagnostics and tack them onto an exit ticket. We don't want to lose a whole other day of instruction to give the quick topic diagnostic. I might do that, third grade sprint as like a quick closer, at the end of the class, or add a couple of the, take part B and add that to a do now or bell ringer. So we're thinking about how we're going to be able to quickly and efficiently diagnose prior to starting our new module or topic. We analyze the data and kind of score that to determine what gaps exist and which students or whether the whole class requires remediation for that particular part. So we've done that today. We practiced that with 5th grade. We started to the process of understanding and studying how those foundational standards, in this case in 3rd and 4th grade, relate to the new content in 5th grade. And we're going to pick up with that at tomorrow's webinar to consider whether these gaps we've identified and the lessons we want to use can be addressed and built in alongside upcoming materials, or whether we really kind of need to pause and get that shored up before some upcoming lessons. And then we'll also look tomorrow at taking action and considering whether this is a way that we can scaffold for the whole class, adjust our pacing calendar, or potentially work within our RTI or intervention process to have differentiated instruction for small group needs. What I'm going to ask us to go ahead and do now for closing is to share in the chat box what is one thing that you've learned today and any questions that you still have. This will be, again, tomorrow we'll dig more into the planning action and how to use the remediation resources. Today we focused on what an overview of the tools are and how to diagnose the gaps and assess from student work. So if you can go ahead and share what your takeaway is and go ahead and as well ask any questions, I'm happy to answer those this afternoon. Great, so it sounds like some people are excited to know what these mysterious tools are and how to access them, and some people enjoy the opportunity to really practice using the diagnostic and identifying what some of these strategies look like. I'll also share that I'll upload in just a moment onto the screen the PowerPoint slides that I used today. So if you are a teacher leader, an instructional coach, or curriculum director in your district, and you have the opportunity at an upcoming, cluster or math department meeting to share this with other teachers in your district, please feel free to use my slides on that. So I'll upload those, excuse me, in just one moment. Also, I've shared my email address on the screen, so feel free to reach out to me with any additional questions. Thanks again for joining us this afternoon. The slides are uploaded now at the top right under Files. And again, tomorrow's webinar will address more of the questions around how to take action and how to fit that in to our daily schedule as well as our year-long pacing calendar.
This has been a presentation of the Louisiana Department of Education, copyright 2017, all rights reserved. For more information or to contact the Louisiana Department of Education on the web, go to www.louisianabelieves.com or call 1-877-453-2721.